for today. I'm Carla Silvestrant, Vice President of the Board, and we will start today with introductions. I will go around my screen here. Ms. Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Ms. Aluni.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Dr. Justice.
Hey, everybody.
Ms. Webb.
Good afternoon.
The staff, could you please say your titles when you say hello?
So I'll jump in and say, hello, Lori Christina Webb, Chief of Staff for the board. And I'll call the next person, Robin.
Hello, Robin Seabrook, Director for the Board Office.
Ms. Hazel.
Good afternoon, Nikki Hazel, Associate Superintendent, Curriculum and Instructional Programs.
Ms. Sharon.
Hello, Stephanie Sharon, Chief of Strategic Initiatives.
Mr. Murphy.
Good afternoon, Scott Murphy, Director of College and Career Readiness and District-Wide Programs, Curriculum and Instruction.
Dr. Addison.
Good afternoon, Keisha Addison, Director in the Office of Shared Accountability.
Ms. Logan.
Hi, everyone. Keisha Logan, Director of Pre-K-12 Curriculum and District-Wide Programs.
And Mr. Seward.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carl Seward, and I serve as the Supervisor for Secondary Mathematics.
All right, wonderful. Great team here today. Colleagues, if I could get agreement on the agenda for today. Everyone has the agenda, great. And any changes or updates to the meeting notes from our last committee meeting? No, I don't see anything. Okay. All right, so just a little context. We are proceeding with the first few meetings of our implementation of our new strategic plan. And our plan here is to cover different grade level benchmarks throughout our meetings. And so if you recall, at our last committee meeting, we talked about literacy in the elementary grades. This committee meeting, we're going to talk about the middle school years, which is algebra. And in our future committee meetings, we will talk about college and career readiness and graduation rates. And so we're trying to pull key indicators from our strategic plan as the data becomes available and really taking a deep dive to see what the state of is in MCPS and where we are moving forward in that direction. So extremely excited to be talking about algebra today, my favorite math class in high school, and I did take it in high school. And so I will pass it on to Ms. Sharon to get us started about this very important topic.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Silvestri and members of the Strategic Planning Committee. We are so excited to be here today to really do a deep dive into our story and our focus on algebra. Could we pull the slide deck up, please? Thank you so much. And go to the next slide. So today we're going to be, as Ms. Silvestri indicated, we're going to be talking about our algebra story within MCPS. And we're going to do this through a variety of different lenses. We are going to talk about the historical context around how we deemed or when we deemed it was appropriate to take algebra, what the pathways have been historically to get to algebra, and why algebra is indeed an indicator of success for college and career and for students to thrive as they move forward. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of where we've been with our pathways, where we currently are in our pathways, and the future of our pathways, as well as the rationale for the changes over time. We're also then going to have an opportunity to dive into some deeper level data around our students that take Algebra 1 and what that looks like for both for their participation in Algebra 1 and their outcomes and their results for Algebra 1. And then we're also going to talk about what we're doing as far as strategies are concerned to really ensure success with this key indicator, and then what challenges that we are facing that we're going to be working on more strategically as we move forward as a district. That's going to be the biggest chunk of our presentation today. And then we also are going to just briefly review some of our next steps around the overall strategic plan. We did present at the board a bit about our communication plan on our website last week. So we're just going to provide some reminders here today about where we're going to go and preview where we want to go for the May 17th Strategic Planning Committee meeting. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, the presentation today aligns with priority area number 1 in our new strategic plan, which is academic excellence, and the objective to improve student achievement in literacy and mathematics. This is our primary focus today is around mathematics. We focused on literacy, as Ms. Silvestri said, at our last strategic planning committee meeting. So we focused on that key benchmark of reading by 3rd grade in our last meeting. And today, when we're thinking about mathematics, we're going to be focusing on, as we stated, that successful completion of Algebra 1, how students get there and what our current data is looking like. Next slide, please. This is just a reminder for the board that in alignment with our objective on improving literacy and mathematics, our key metric of success is the % of students meeting the evidence of learning in mathematics, because that's our theme of today. So our baseline is that we had from the last school year, from spring of last year, 55.4% of students met 2 out of 3 evidence of learning measures for mathematics. Our goal for this year is 64.1%. And I believe that you're going to be seeing some more detailed data on April 7th about where we are actually at in evidence of learning around mathematics as well. So you'll be seeing that coming up with the board. Next slide, please. So at this time, I would like to, now that we have framed the presentation for today, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Seward, our secondary supervisor of mathematics.
Thank you, Ms. Sharon, and good afternoon, Ms. Silvestri, Ms. Harris, Ms. Oluni, and Dr. Joftis. My name is Carl Seward, and I serve as the supervisor for secondary mathematics within the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs. As Ms. Sharon framed today, we will speak to you about a mathematics course that every MCPS student must take, that is Algebra 1. I will speak to a brief history of where the class has been for us as a district, where we are at the moment, and where we want to take the course for all of our students moving forward. Next slide, please. And in that vein, before we begin to dive deeply into the presentation, there are 3 guiding questions we ask for you to consider as we begin this conversation this afternoon. 1, what has been the evolution of student participation and performance in Algebra 1 here in MCPS? How do our current practices provide equitable opportunities for students to successfully complete Algebra 1? And 3, how will we take what we know to move our work forward and ensure student success in Algebra 1? Next slide, please. In the past, as a district, we have trumpeted the idea that every student should take the course Algebra 1 by 8th grade. Indeed, in many schools across our country, Algebra 1 in the 8th grade has become a norm. One reason for the push to offer Algebra 1 earlier has been because of student performance among comparable industrialized countries on international assessments. The belief held by many is that giving students earlier opportunities to complete Algebra 1 and taking more advanced mathematics courses at the high school level will solve this problem. However, our competitiveness as a district, state, and nation is more complex than simply offering students the opportunity to take Algebra 1 earlier. Our position is for students to be enrolled in Algebra 1 when students demonstrate prerequisite mathematical understandings, skills, and readiness. This can show up for students in the 7th grade. This can show up for students in the 8th grade. And yes, this can show up for students in the 9th grade as well. To prioritize a goal of algebra by a particular grade and not by the level of readiness for any student, I believe does more harm than good. Algebra 1 is a mathematics course that some have referred to as a gatekeeper to higher education, both in mathematics and in other fields. The research has shown us that students who complete a mathematics course beyond the level of Algebra 2 are more than twice as likely to pursue and complete a post-secondary degree. So, if we are to believe the aforementioned is true, then we may also contend that Algebra 1 is the most important high school mathematics course that we offer. And I submit to you this afternoon with strong conviction that Algebra 1 is too important to the future of our students, and we must be thoughtful around the conversations we have around the course, and we must commit ourselves to the idea of readiness and how do we prepare students appropriately for the course, and not merely how do we prepare students for the course by a particular grade, be it a higher than 8th grade or lower than 8th grade. Next slide, please. On this slide, we share with you district data from our past. This data was collected in 2018 and speaks to students that were in the 8th grade during the academic year 2017-2018. The graph represents the percent of students enrolled in the most advanced mathematics pathway possible at that time. What do you notice about this data? What do you wonder about this data? When I joined MCPS this past July and then saw this data, I noticed that every focus group, everyone, showed a decrease in the number of students that were enrolled in the most advanced pathway. I also noticed that the most precipitous decrease was with a focus group that many people would not at first blush, due to other access and opportunity data, believe would drop at all, much less by 25 percentage points. And then I wondered, perhaps access is not the only issue. Perhaps the underlying issue is a performance issue, and perhaps the work of the secondary mathematics team as we move forward is to look at the fidelity of what the research tells us about the best first instruction and what that looks like, and are those practices consistently appearing before our students? Next slide, please. Members of the Strategic Planning Committee, we offer Algebra 1 to our students as early as 7th grade, and indeed, in a few isolated incidences, even as early as 6th grade. To be clear, our position is that successful completion of a rigorous algebra course, and really any mathematics course, requires students to have the prerequisite mathematical understandings and skills, along with a readiness to understand abstract mathematical definitions, to work with abstract models and representations, and to understand and make connections among mathematical structures. But not only that, we believe that readiness should extend to our students being able to make abstract generalizations of the knowledge that they have learned. For some of our students, this level of readiness and prerequisite skills avail themselves as early as 7th grade. For a larger number of our students, it's in 8th grade. And for some students, that skill avails itself in 9th grade, all based on prerequisite understandings and skills and the ability to independently demonstrate these skills. Our position is that Algebra 1 should be taken when students have the prerequisite understandings, skills, and readiness. And 2, and it is perfectly acceptable for this to occur at different points in a student's maturation. Next slide, please. This slide shares with you our mathematics progression for the 2021-2022 school year. We created this graphical representation this past fall to share with our principals in order for them, in a straightforward way, think about the inventory of middle school mathematics courses that we provide here in Montgomery County. For the purposes of our conversation today, I elevate for the Strategic Planning Committee 3 options we provide students to access Algebra 1. To the left of this graphic, we have our traditional path, where a student is in Math 5, has the opportunity to take Math 6, and then Math 7, and then Math 8. The student has received a solid mathematical foundation that prepares them for success in Algebra 1 in the 9th grade. Second, we provide a progression that allows students to access Algebra 1 by 8th grade, by them being able to take a course that we call Investigations into Mathematics, which covers topics in grade 7 and grade 8 in the 7th grade, or for potentially taking Math 8 as a 7th grader. The third option that we provide is for students enrolled in a course that we call Applied Investigations into Mathematics, which is also a combination of grade 7 and grade 8 mathematics for students to access Algebra 1 as early as 7th grade. You will notice that there is a course called Accelerated Mathematics 6+ that does not lead anywhere. And I want to highlight on the next slide more about that particular course and how it relates to Algebra 1 in the 8th grade. May we move to the next slide, please? This slide shares with you our mathematics progression for the upcoming academic year 2022-2023. We created this graphic again this past fall to share with our principals in a straightforward way about the inventory of middle school mathematics courses that we will provide next year. Notably, you will see the inclusion in the middle of this graphic of a course that we want to bring on board called Accelerated Mathematics 7+. So you might be asking yourself, how is Accelerated Mathematics 7+ connected to Algebra 1? Well, Accelerated Mathematics 7+, when preceded by Accelerated Math 6+, is the opportunity for students to have Algebra 1 by the 8th grade by compressing 3 years of material into 2 years, and not having to compress 2 years of material into 1 school year. Again, not that Algebra 1 by the 8th grade is our exclusive goal. We bring forward once more that our goal is to offer Algebra 1 when students demonstrate prerequisite mathematical understanding, skills, and readiness. Our role, in part, here in secondary mathematics is to create multiple opportunities for that to happen at different points in time. We have created the opportunity for students to have access to Algebra 1 by 7th grade, by 8th grade, and by 9th grade. And our ultimate goal is for students to have the prerequisite mathematical understandings and skills and readiness to understand abstract mathematical definitions, work with abstract models and representations, and to understand and make connections and abstract generalizations of their knowledge. Next slide, please. And in thinking about how we create successful opportunities to access Algebra 1, be it in the 7th grade, 8th grade, or 9th grade, we present very briefly to you opportunities that exist for our students after Algebra 1. Typically, after Algebra 1, students are enrolled in geometry, then Algebra 2. Then they have the opportunity to branch out into mathematics courses that are more interest-based. For example, for a student that is interested in a career that involves science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, a student may choose our pre-calculus and calculus progression. For a student that's interested in business applications or data science, they may be more interested in our statistics and AP statistics path progression. And students that are more interested in the financial services industry, they may decide to take our quantitative literacy course. Please note that one of the beautiful aspects of our inventory of high school mathematics course options is the fact that many courses are not as interdependent as one might imagine. For example, in theory, a student could take geometry and algebra 2 at the same time, or a student in pre-calculus could also be enrolled in quantitative literacy. And in some of our schools, that is exactly what's happening. Our high school inventory of mathematics courses is dynamic in that manner. Next slide, please. Before we continue with the presentation, we want to allow the opportunity for a discussion on what we have presented up to this point. So Ms. Sharon and I ask what questions you may have at the moment about what we've shared so far.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions so far? Dr. Joftis and then Ms. Looney and then Ms. Harris.
Mr. Seward, thank you very much for that. That's a great presentation. I think I have two questions. The first one is if we have any evidence that delaying students taking algebra to the 9th grade, if their preparation and then therefore success for algebra increases.
Dr. Joftis, what we know from the research is that when students have an opportunity to have more mathematical experiences coupled with strong prerequisite skills, students are more successful in the Algebra 1 courses as they advance through our program of studies going from middle school to high school.
So I guess one of the things I'm worrying about, sort of underlying that bigger question, is what are the teachers that students taking algebra in 9th grade, are they as qualified as those teaching higher level mathematics to students who have taken algebra? And number two, for lack of a better term, I'm wondering if there's any stigma associated with students taking algebra in 9th grade that might make it harder for them to be successful in that class.
So I will work backwards with your questions, Dr. Joftis. I'm not sure. Stigma is based off of a community perception, and so being new to Montgomery County, I can't speak to that, and I'm only 8 months old in Montgomery County to that. What I will say from the research that we cite out of the University of Illinois at Chicago, and I firmly believe in this, there are 3 things that the secondary mathematics team is going to move forward to answer your first question. I think it's important for us to better prepare students to succeed before they get to the Algebra 1 course. We believe that enhancing learning opportunities for underprepared learners during the Algebra 1 course is the focus of our work, and enhancing the teaching capacity to support all learners is a part of our work. So the professional development for our teachers to make sure that students are ready for the course whenever they access the course, be it 7th grade, 8th grade, or 9th grade, is certainly the work of this office.
Okay. Thank you. And then the second question, so when I used to work in this area a little bit, that there was this big push to get kids ultimately at least into Algebra 2, which clearly we are, I don't know if are we required, do we require Algebra 2 to graduate?
As a part of the requirements for the state of Maryland for a student to graduate, they need 4 mathematics credits. And so Algebra 2 is certainly one of the mathematics courses that they would take in order to fulfill that graduation requirement.
Okay, so in other words, in order to get 4 credits, mathematics credits in high school, a student would need to take Algebra 2 for certain, right?
The great majority of our students do take Algebra 2.
Okay. Okay, so that's my question. So it's possible, though, not to take Algebra 2 and still graduate with a regular degree?
Well, in the most rare of circumstances. So Dr. Joftis, our students that are alternative learning outcome students, they may not be in the Algebra 2 course. So okay. I don't want to use the word all in that context.
No, I understand. No, that's what I'm trying to get at. I was just trying to get that clarification. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, if I could just address a little bit that question you raised about the stigma of taking algebra in grade 9. That is a conversation we've actually been having for the last few years with our parent community, because that is a concern. And so we recognize historically there has been a stigma around taking algebra in grade 9. We've been trying to change that over the last couple of years. And we also recognize, particularly coming out of this pandemic, there are students who've made the choice because they understand how important algebra is to repeat the class. And so we want to make sure that students really feel okay with that decision and that there is no stigma around it. But we also hear your point, and I think that ERS study that was done a few years ago around who's the teacher in the course is really critical, and those are conversations that we've been having with our schools as well.
Ms. Aluni?
Yeah, continuing on the discussion of stigma just a little bit, I can say as a student and from my experiences in the system, limited as they may be, I do see that stigma sort of shifting and dissipating in a positive way. So I think that's reflective of the work that's being done. But my question was, when I speak with students about math progression, I really hear two overarching kinds of concerns. The first, and I think this has really become more prevalent coming out of online learning, virtual learning, is that a lot of students feel like math is moving on. There's like this linear progression that's been predetermined, and they were put on a course, a train, a vehicle, whatever the metaphor may be, and it's going on without them. It has no care, no concern for their level or how much they were able to learn online over Zoom, and it's moving without them. And the second concern that I hear less, but still from a good number of students, is they feel that they were placed into one of those moving trains really, really early on in their mathematics career, as early as 4th grade, in determining whether they should be placed in a compacted or an on-level course. And that train has continued, even though they feel like they're ready for a higher level course. And so those are different concerns, but I think they both stem from this idea that there's an early placement that sort of just continues regardless of what a current student's level is. And so I was wondering how we're making sure that that doesn't continue to happen or doesn't happen right now for our students, and that math placement is based on a student's current achievement and readiness level. How are we assessing that in real time?
Thank you for your question, Ms. Oluni. It's two things I can think of off the top of my head. Number one, I think us having the opportunity to share the math progressions with our principal groups. We've had an opportunity to visit both the middle school PLC and the high school PLC principal groups and talk about our vision for mathematics progression and by extension mathematics instruction. And number two, our office has had the opportunity to be in conversation with the instructional specialists that support our secondary counselors. And so to the extent that students at times consult their counselors for recommendations of math placement, and counselors may come to the table with a preconceived expectation of what the next course will be. Part of it is an education tour of letting people know these are the inventory of courses at the high school level and at the middle school level, re-examining our prerequisites to make sure that we build in flexibility for classes that are less interdependent in one another, that occurs more at the high school level than not. So a lot of what you're talking about is us sharing with our community, these are the options, and indeed students are not, to use one of the analogies that you referenced, they're not stuck on one path, but there are multiple opportunities for them to access courses at different points in their academic career.
And can you explain how a future course recommendation is made? Does the student's current teacher make a recommendation, or is it really just based on the student's stated comfort level?
It's a few factors. Certainly a teacher recommendation would be considered, the course grade would be considered. And so there's a few factors that factor into that. Certainly our students have the opportunity to advocate for themselves a course if they believe that a placement would need a little bit more conversation, and they would achieve that advocacy through their professional school counselor.
Okay, and one last question. I remember early on in this school year, we had a conversation at the full board table with many of similar faces that we see here about acceleration, not remediation. And there was some concern from myself and a lot of my colleagues that, acceleration, not remediation is sort of continuing this train narrative that it's going on regardless of what a student's current comfort level is and skill level is following months of virtual learning. Where does that factor into this conversation about math placement? Or how does it?
Well, I'm not sure if the conversation about acceleration and math placement, I don't think those are two conversations. I think that the conversation about acceleration without remediation is us being strategic and building in the prerequisite skills that students may have missed in the previous class that show up in the class that they are currently enrolled. Success in that course would help determine the choice of their next math course. So in that way, they're related, but I would not see that as a one-to-one correspondence. The acceleration of remediation doesn't lead to placement. The acceleration of remediation leads to class performance. Class performance leads to a recommendation of courses.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that we're still, I guess, promoting and talking to counselors about allowing students to maybe retake a course or go back depending on their prerequisite knowledge. Thank you.
Ms. Harris?
Yeah, thank you very much for this information that you're sharing today. It does look like we are, in my mind, thankfully taking another look at how we are doing the mathematics progression through middle and high school. And I would just echo some of Ms. Oluni's comments because advocates and allies for at least a decade that I'm aware of have been expressing concerns that in these math pathways, starting with the choices in middle school, there's been too much telling of students what you will take and not nearly enough asking students what's your interest and what do you feel like you're ready for. And then that goes in both directions. As Ms. Oluni said, students have been sort of placed on in a trajectory. And that trajectory, based on where you are in sixth grade, there's been not as much opportunity as there should be for students to make choices and kind of maybe perhaps deviate from that trajectory. Because in my view, I still look at the math offerings in high school. When we tell students, no matter where you end middle school, and for some of our students, that's geometry, you have to take 4 credits of math in high school. And I feel like our offerings for those students particularly are not really all that robust. So I appreciate the look at what we can do to create trajectories that really drill down on the application piece and the critical thinking piece, because I think that's what our higher level educators have been saying for quite some time. Our high school students are coming and maybe they did really great in their high school math classes, but they can't apply. And so this, I think, is a really interesting way of looking at how we place students, and that is readiness, and not just first this, then that, then that, then that. So a question, I think, is how are we going to, and you just talked about it a little bit, but ensure that the conversation around which math class when is one that really is fully inclusive of the students themselves and provides an opportunity for that question to be revisited, more than maybe once, 6th grade, 9th grade.
And so I would say 2 things to that, Ms. Harris. And the first thing I would say is in some schools that is probably happening. Of the 66 secondary schools that we support, that's probably happening at some level at some schools. The second thing I would say, which is more to your question, is it's about having a conversation with our school principals. And I've had an opportunity to be before our middle school and high school principals a couple of times, and making sure that they have clarity on what options exist, and engaging our middle school and high school principals on a protocol that is both efficient and effective in order to facilitate that conversation.
If I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Ms. Harris. I was just going to add to your question, and certainly regarding some of your interests around career readiness, I want to underscore what was in the slides around the statistics pathway. It used to be that once you hit calculus, okay, now it's multivariable calculus, and then it's linear equations, and it's on to like the highest level, college level math. This statistics pathway is really important for STEM majors, for career readiness, for data science. And so at some point, it really does become crosswalk not only of math readiness, but also of student interest and career paths, and how the math trajectory is tied to that. Also, the on and off ramps that exist, you saw those arrows going different directions, that more and more, it's hopefully not just a one-way train that you can't get off, but that there's on ramps, off ramps to have a different journey depending on interest as well as readiness. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
And if I may add one more piece as well, in terms of informing, listening to students, but also the work that we have to do to inform our parents. As Ms. Aluni said, to be in algebra by 7th grade often means that you are in an advanced course in elementary, and it's selected at the end of 3rd grade. So it does start very early. And we have been working to do a better job of informing parents at the end of 3rd grade. What does that actually mean for your child when you get to high school? Because many don't really understand that they do have to continue with the 4 years of mathematics and those upper level courses. And so we are trying to do a better job of informing parents of younger children so that they know what that path might look like, but allowing for some on and off ramps as well for those students. So it starts early as we do this work.
And I appreciate that, Ms. Hazel, because I think, as we all know, we have, I would say, a relatively small segment of our parent population that's very well informed about our math pathways. And they're very vocal about that knowledge and their advocacy. But the vast majority of parents just assume it's going to be okay. And maybe the student's going to pick a class, or the counselor is going to give them, make a recommendation, and things are going to move on from there. So I really appreciate what you said about doing a better job of really helping our parents understand the implications of math pathways, even starting very early. And then I guess my last question is, when we looked at the slide deck and you were talking about these now various math pathways and all the interconnected areas and the math 6+ and 7+, and are we ensuring, and this I know is a very big concern, and we've been talking about a lot at the board table around differentiation and how, the levels at which our schools are provided a lot of autonomy to address the unique needs of their community, but ways in which we are also trying to ensure fidelity across the system. So are we sure that all of our middle schools are going to equally provide the same options to students? Or are we going to be in a place where some middle schools provide all of the options and others not all of the options?
I would say, Ms. Harris, that certainly principals have the discretion over their master schedules. So I would not be able to tell you at this time what the 40 middle school master schedules look like, or the 26 high school master schedules look like. And I would defer what our principals' master schedules look like to our principal colleagues. What I will say is, regardless of the courses that our principals choose to offer on their campuses, one thing we say is true: the professional development to make sure that the cadre of teachers that are in front of our kids, to make sure that they know the mathematics, our office is charged in part to provide that professional development and support. And so whatever a principal decides to do with their master schedule, we stand ready to support their teachers in order to support our students.
And I think our parents have an interest in seeing some fidelity. We have lots of families that have students in multiple schools and hear frustrations a lot about things being different in ways that feel, not like some students are getting very different opportunities. And the last thing I was really interested to hear you say, and I hope we're getting to this next, Mr. Seward, you mentioned, one of our goals now is to ensure best first instruction, because, the evidence is really, really clear. The two most important factors in student academic success are, teacher excellence and parent engagement. And we can only control one of those, and only to a limited extent that one. So I'm really interested to hear more about the best first instruction piece.
A lot of what we want to do as a secondary math team, and I do remember this being mentioned at the March 8th full Board of Education meeting is the opportunity to get in schools as often as we can to monitor what's going on, to make sure that our teachers have the strategies to support good first instruction, and when we see opportunities for growth, to avail ourselves to provide that support to teachers in schools so that students can have that best first instruction. That is our work now, and that is definitely our work moving forward.
Thank you.
Ms. Aluni, did you have another question?
Yeah, just two quick comments that I wanted to make. One, although I understand the need to assess students early in math placement, it seems kind of silly that an assessment and a placement that's made in 3rd grade impacts, for many students, the math classes that they're taking up until high school. So I'd just like to, whether it's here today or in a future session, hear more about those periodic on and off ramps for students, if that's an assessment, or what it looks like to get a student either placed up into a higher course, depending on their success, or rearranged throughout those however many years. I don't know if Ms. Hazel, you want to speak to that now.
Well, I can start by saying that it starts so early just because we use the Maryland College and Career Readiness Standards, college or Common Core State Standards, which currently has algebra as a 9th grade course. And so for us to be able to have our students take that course in 7th grade or 8th grade, we have to make some shifts or compact, where the term compacted math came from, compact our standards in order to allow students to be able to access algebra in those earlier grades. And so in order for students to be able to achieve that 7th grade algebra course, they would need to start in 4th grade with some compacting of the standards in order to be able to get there by 7th. So that's why it starts so early. End of grade 3 identification. So K to 3, everybody's taking a grade level course. What I think sometimes people don't realize is that even the K to 3 has been compacted so that we can get to algebra by grade 8 for most of our students. So all students actually are taking some level of compacted math. We call it in MCPS grade level, but really we have done that compaction all the way starting in kindergarten to allow for 8th grade algebra. And then what Carl and his team have been working on, and we've been doing for the last year or two, is coming up with some on and off ramps. We actually, for the first time this school year, or actually last spring, identified students centrally that we believed should be in the advanced courses at elementary. Normally, we've just left it up to the schools to decide. But we felt that there were some students that were overlooked. And we did find more Black and Brown students that were identified, and we were able to let schools know. But we also feel that generally we're over-identifying students. And so as you saw that data chart that Carl showed, that decline in the participation. So we want to get that right balance of making sure that we have identified students based on some set data points that we have identified centrally. Schools obviously can add more students because they know them best. But we also want to have those opportunities if it's not the right placement for students to be able to step back a little bit to that grade level, or if we feel students need more rigor and acceleration, that they should be able to move forward. So we are trying to create those on and off ramps for our students.
Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to hear a little bit more from, was those periodic assessments and what exactly that consists of and looks like. Because as you said, not only is it a really early assessment, there are oftentimes biases, unconscious biases that just happen in placements like that. So making sure it happens as frequently as possible, because we never know what might happen in a student's math career. And the second point I wanted to make, just a really quick comment about Ms. Harris, what you mentioned about students who take geometry as early as 8th grade not having a lot of course offerings in the future. Something I'm really excited about and that Ms. Sharon and I and others have discussed is next year, through expanding our course offerings at all of our secondary schools through virtual mediums, making sure that those really advanced math courses like multivariable, like linear algebra, are available to all students. Because right now I think we're in a really inequitable landscape where, without even having to name exact schools, I'm sure you all can imagine the high schools that have access to those really high advanced courses for students who want to pursue rigorous STEM fields in the future, and schools that don't. So I'm looking forward to seeing that corrected as early as next school year.
Thank you. And I hear you, what you're saying, Ms. Aluni, in terms of the over-identification, but that graph does show that most of the kids are getting off the most rigorous path because the line goes down consistently for most populations. I did also want to address what you mentioned about the students feeling like they may not have learned everything during the pandemic, and now the math course is progressing as scheduled. And so in last year, Ms. Hazel, I heard you say that this year and the next couple of years, the curriculum would be adjusted to include segments of the curriculum that were not covered during our online learning. So if you could speak a little bit about that to ease our students' minds that no, this is intentional. What you are getting today is supplemented by what you didn't get during online learning. Or
Carl, do you want to speak to the
if I may,
that we have?
if I may, yes, thank you. And so, Ms. Silvestri, one of the things that we're doing this summer, and we did so last year as well, and definitely very intentionally this summer, is taking a second look at the curriculum and the pacing for all of our secondary mathematics courses to make sure that students know the math that's in the course that they're enrolled. So if a student is enrolled in geometry, if they're enrolled in algebra 2, they're entitled to receive that learning for the course that they're enrolled in. And at the same time, we recognize that there are skills that were not taught when we were in pandemic times. There were skills that were taught and perhaps they did not stick in students' brains. And over the course of the next 2 years, we're incorporating the lost learning into our curriculum documents so that over time, students will have the opportunity to be caught up on that missed learning.
And for Ms. Aluni's sake, since she's a senior this year, is that happening this year as well, or is that starting this summer?
Is that question for me or Ms. Aluni?
No, for you. Okay. So is that happening now for this school year, or is that are you planning that in the summer for future years?
It's both. We're doing that now. So one of the things that we've done here in OSIP is incorporate missed learning opportunities into our curriculum documents this year. We're going to continue to do that work and do it even more intentionally because we have data. So we have the opportunity to see, okay, from what we thought students knew, and I'll think about one example. We know that the Pythagorean theorem was material that was taught last year in pandemic times. When we had an opportunity to speak with one of our teachers, that teacher felt that it may have been taught, but it didn't stick with students. So we're receiving that feedback, and from that feedback, we're doing additional modifications and adjustments to make sure that over time, students get the learning that they missed. This year, we had an opportunity to make those adjustments. We're going to be even more intentional by receiving the feedback from our teachers and our teacher leaders to make sure that we continue to do that in next school year.
Thank you. And also, Ms. Aluni mentioned the expansion of courses that can be offered virtually. I know that compacted math was one of those pilot courses this year. And I just wanted to hear how that went. What's some of the challenges and opportunities as we grow this model of virtual learning so that we can offer everything that our students need through the entire system?
The compacted math class does not live in the secondary wheelhouse, so I will defer to Dr. Logan.
Yep, I will certainly start a response to that, and Mr. Murphy can jump in as well. So this year, we were able to offer seats in compacted 4-5 and 5-6 through the virtual academy. And with us identifying centrally students, some schools needed support because they weren't able to offer or have a full-time teacher to be able to teach that class. And we were able to make it work. After a lot of collaboration with the virtual academy and the individual schools, and just making sure that those students were able to get what they need. So we are now at a place where we have that, but we're also in a great place where we can plan intentionally to make that time available for those schools and coordinate ahead of time now for next school year. So we'll continue to have opportunities through the virtual academy, have some seats that we're setting aside and that are available for compacted 4-5 and 5-6 to support schools around the county where they may not be able to offer that at their home school, and be able to do that in a way that is intentional and that works with the schedules at those schools.
But your sense is that the virtual format is working for the majority of students that piloted that class this year?
Yes, that is the sense. I know they're grateful to be able to have that opportunity. We're continuing to collect some feedback as we go throughout the year on just assessing how things are going so that we can make some changes and ensure that we incorporate that feedback next year. But it's working for right now for students.
And just one final comment. I know that in the past, I had heard staff talk about our student math outcomes are dependent on the confidence and training that our teachers have in delivering that math content. And so I appreciate, Mr. Seward, your emphasis on professional development for our teachers so that they're confident and well equipped to teach the math that we need them to teach. And also Ms. Hazel, just our equity focus on who is actually in front of which children and their expertise and the needs of the students. I also hear great things about the elementary math curriculum, so I'm so far so good. So I'm happy to hear those comments from the public and parents. Okay, I think we can move on to the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Silvestri. And if we may advance to the next slide, please. As we continue our conversation, let us now look at some data. Here in Montgomery County, we have 14,713 students registered as ninth graders. Of those 14,713 students, 8,945 students have taken and passed Algebra 1 by 8th grade. Another way to think about this is almost 61% of our ninth graders start high school in a mathematics course that is geometry or higher. We have 3,563 of our current ninth graders currently enrolled in Algebra 1. So you may have noticed that the number of students that have that need to take Algebra 1 and the number of students currently enrolled in Algebra 1 are two different numbers. The 2,205 students that are not accounted for in this graphic is our ninth graders who have not passed Algebra 1 and are not enrolled in the Algebra 1 course this school year. Allow me to explain. Inside of the 2,205 number are ninth grade students in our district that have alternative learning outcomes and thereby would not be enrolled in Algebra 1 at this time. Also, students who have been administratively placed into geometry before Algebra 1. This is something that happens, for example, when we receive international students who have demonstrated Algebra 1 proficiency and we award credit for the course based on their academic transcript from their home country. 2, we know that in a few high schools, one way that they support multilingual learners is to place students in a geometry class first and then in Algebra 1, because our current geometry curriculum is not as vocabulary intensive as an algebra course, providing students an opportunity to work on language development as well as their mathematics knowledge acquisition before enrolling into an Algebra 1 course. I would like to draw your attention to the right. We highlight the details for grades of students that were enrolled in Algebra 1 during their middle school careers, be it 7th grade or 8th grade. You will note that nearly 92% of students passed the class in 7th grade with a grade of D or higher, and 89.5% of 7th graders passed the class with the grade of C or higher. You will also notice that 76.4% of our 8th graders passed the class with a D or higher, and 66.3% of our 8th graders passed the class with a grade of C or higher. These numbers also tell a story. What do you notice and what do you wonder? We notice that the students that were placed in Algebra 1 in 7th grade appear from the data to be doing quite well in Algebra 1, whereas students with more mathematics experience are not performing on par. This may lead us to wonder several things, to include but not limited to, how is the instruction different in 7th grade versus 8th grade? Who are teaching those courses? What is the level of readiness and ability of the teacher to teach the course at either grade? And what is the level of readiness for our students, particularly in 8th grade, to be successful in the course? Next slide, please. This slide asks the following research question. Of current grade 9 students, how many have either passed or are currently passing Algebra 1? We present this data to you by student focus group. We find that our students receiving FARMS services are passing or have passed Algebra 1 at a rate of 75.7%, when passing is determined by a grade of D or higher, and 64% when passing is determined by the grade of C or higher. We find that our students receiving special education services are passing or have passed Algebra 1 at a rate of 70.7% when passing is determined by the grade of D or higher, and 53.3% when passing is determined by the grade of C or higher. And we find that our students identified as limited English proficient are passing Algebra 1 at a rate of 63.3% when passing is determined by the grade of D or higher, and 49.8% when passing is determined by the grade of C or higher. Next slide, please. This slide asks another research question that we had. Of the current 5,768 grade 9 students who have not yet passed Algebra 1, which math course are they currently enrolled in right now? We present this data to you by course enrollment that you will find on the vertical axis and by student group on the horizontal axis. You will note from the data that 3,563 students are currently enrolled in Algebra 1, leaving the number that we referred to earlier in this presentation, 2,205 students that are not enrolled in, that are enrolled rather in other courses. So if we look at that 2,205 number, the students that are not currently enrolled in an Algebra 1 course, 1,914 students are in a course that is higher than Algebra 1, or in other words, 86.8% of our students currently not in Algebra 1 in 9th grade are in a course that is higher than Algebra 1. The remaining 13.2% of those students make up students in one of either two groups. Again, are alternative learning outcomes students or are emergent multilingual learner students that take another mathematics course that we offer in our inventory that bridges mathematics learning for students that are new to our country that have demonstrated below grade level mathematics proficiency.
Mr. Seward, I'm sorry to interrupt. I feel like I must be interpreting this incorrectly. So this is saying of students who have not yet passed Algebra 1, most of them are in courses higher than Algebra 2?
Most of them, and so Dr. Justice, I apologize for not being clear. So we have a number of students, we have about a little over 3,500 students of the 5,000 number that are in the Algebra 1 course. The purpose of this graphic is to articulate for this committee where exactly are those 2,205 students that have not taken and passed Algebra 1 that are currently ninth graders. And so if you look at the fourth ribbon down, that accentuates the number of Algebra 1 students. But if you look at the ribbon below the Algebra 1 ribbon, the number of students that are not that are in ninth grade, but in a class that is lower than Algebra 1, that number represents the number of students that are either our alternative learning outcome students, that's about 146, or students that are new to our country that are 2 or more grade levels below, and we have a mathematics course that supports those students.
No, I understand that. What I'm not understanding is how a student could be taking Algebra 2 in ninth grade if they haven't passed Algebra 1.
That's a good question. So here's one example. For a student that comes to us here in Montgomery County, and I'll use an example of an international student. If an international student comes to Montgomery County, they have demonstrated that they have mastered the skills in Algebra 1.
Oh, okay.
What we have the ability to do is administratively award the credit based off of their transcript from their home country.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was just having a hard time wrapping my head around that.
And I apologize for not being clear.
No, that's okay.
May we go back to the slide deck? And may we have an opportunity to advance to the next slide. So finally, we would like you to know what is working, what are our growth opportunities, and future work. What do those things look like? We know that students are learning mathematics well when teachers implement our curriculum, the illustrative mathematics curriculum, with fidelity. That is the curriculum that we provide for most of our middle school courses. To increase the fidelity to the curriculum throughout the year, we in the Office of Pre-K through 12 Curriculum and the Secondary Mathematics Unit specifically have provided curriculum implementation support and professional development to hundreds of unique teachers, teacher leaders, and paraeducators. 2, we have provided direct support to our administrators, our teacher leaders, and teachers by members of the secondary mathematics team and myself going to schools to help analyze data, talk about best instructional practices, and even co-plan, co-teach, and co-reflect with our teachers. Our growth opportunities and future work includes our office getting out to more schools more often, providing informal feedback to our teachers and our administrators on best practices, and supporting administrators with follow-up sessions with teachers to see how well best practice strategies are working. To help with this work, we will work hand in glove with the Office of School Support and Improvement and the Office of Special Education to leverage the knowledge base that exists in those offices to help support all students. And third, we will continue to communicate clearly and often what are the strategies that supports students that are in our focus groups, not only raise the level of achievement for some students, but to raise the level of achievement for all students. This concludes our formal presentation, Ms. Silvestri, and Ms. Sharon and I turn the presentation back over to you for discussion.
Thank you. Questions, colleagues? Ms. Harris.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to frame the question, but I think for a while, also a lot of the advocates and the allies, students and parents alike, have been concerned about when we say that, percentage of students, and I think the slide deck showed that we say they passed Algebra 1, but depending on the demographic group you're looking at, up to 12% of those students got a D. And so we passed the class, and then we're pushing them forward to the next thing. And just wondering if a D is a benchmark that we are comfortable with, saying a student has demonstrated adequate knowledge mastery to move on to geometry, algebra 2, whatever the next thing is. And what we're doing about what we know about how those students who pass Algebra 1 with a D do when they move on their algebra, on their math trajectory.
So, Ms. Harris, thank you for that comment. There are 2 things I'll say. we in the presentation of the data, we want to present the full picture. And so D is not something that we want students to aspire to. And D is a passing grade. And so in the presentation of the data, we want to present the whole picture. And that's why we were mindful in thinking about the research questions in the data. What do the numbers look like at passing? And we don't want students to ascribe to a D and that it's passing. And we also took great care to make sure that we presented the numbers of what it looks like when the benchmark is C. And so the presentation of that data is not for us to suggest that is aspirational, is to provide this committee the full picture of what's going on in courses. That's to your first point. To your second point, I think it is important for our office, the secondary mathematics office, to get out in schools often, regularly, to provide that support to teachers, because there's a reason why those students are getting a D. And what you had an opportunity to see was when we look at our service groups or when we look at our student focus groups, the proportion of students that had Ds were higher in those groups than in the aggregate for all of our students here in MCPS. So that's the conversation that we're having with our teacher leaders now and moving forward. That is what we'll be looking for when we visit schools, and that's an area that we definitely are interested in addressing.
Have we done a look? I mean, what have we learned about our students that pass with the D and move forward? How they do, and are we even? And I know we're going to get to it, in future strategic planning meetings. But since we're talking about algebra as a benchmark for future academic success beyond high school, what do we know about the future academic success of the students who pass that class with that D grade? Have we looked at that question?
We will, with two things with that. We know that we're going to need to provide more professional development to our teachers to support those students with the missed learning. And we will be looking at, as we move forward, what do teachers need in order to support students that did get that D? And I'll even say, and that got that C, because there's material, there's learning that is missed, that although they did not get a failing grade, they got a grade that was close to a failing grade. So our work is to support teachers in identifying what is happening with the student that's getting the D and what is the resolution for the student that gets the D. We've not had an opportunity to look at that work in this academic year. It is definitely the work that we're looking at as we look at data that's coming to forward to this board in future meetings, and definitely part of our summer work.
And if I may add on to what Mr. Seward shared, it is something that we explored in the past, but I just want to remind us that the course grade is just one measure of a student's understanding of that content area. And so ideally, we would have additional measures to support what we know a student knows and is able to do in that algebra course. And in our past explorations internally as a district, sometimes we saw a student may have earned a lower grade in the course, but they performed at a high level on the state assessment, for example. And so given we've been in the pandemic and we have not had state assessments for a while, we need an opportunity to get additional data to continue to kind of explore and answer your question, Ms. Harris, around what do we know about students who take it in high school and the connection to their additional performance going forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Joftis.
Thanks. And again, thanks to you all for a really, really good presentation. I guess I'd just like to raise the issue of the teacher shortage and recognize the challenge that is posing and will continue to pose. I don't know if there's anything to be said about that, but I guess I'd just like to hear your thoughts about it.
One of the things that we've done here in secondary mathematics that I'm proud to say that we've done is, for when shortages have shown up in schools, our small part is as one of the priorities of our school district. All of us are recruiters. So we've reached out to our local universities here in the state of Maryland, to their teacher education departments and to their math departments. And who's graduating in December? We've formed a partnership with the University of Maryland to get some of their graduates in their master's degree programs and teacher education programs to help support recruitment. And I think one of the things that we as a district provide are opportunities for teachers to grow. And I remember 19 years ago when I started my career, I was looking for a school district that would help me grow my career. And so I think that MCPS is positioned to recruit people, and certainly in secondary mathematics, to the extent that we're able to, and that we're all recruiters, we're doing that work as well.
Dr. Joftis, if I could add, and I think I heard Ms. Silvestri say it earlier, and I hope it's true, that she's hearing good things about the curriculum. A high quality curriculum matters. I think in our previous curriculum, we heard from teachers all the time about, the challenge in getting resources and the challenge in rolling out the curriculum. I think when we adopted this curriculum, part of the criteria was usability and teachers having resources at their fingertips. And so I'd like to think also a high quality curriculum that's supported by strong professional development and the people to deliver it also helps us not only recruit, but retain math teachers.
Thank you. I don't think I have any questions. I think my question was related to Ms. Harris's, if you get a D in algebra in middle school, what's that conversation with families in terms of what happens next? I know we don't want to retain anyone, even if it's in a class. That's not the culture that is preferred. But certainly I would not be happy if my child got a D in algebra and then hope that the teacher's getting the professional development to help her fill in the gaps in later classes. So I don't think a D in algebra in middle school is acceptable, and I hope that we're having these conversations with families that it's okay to retake it in high school, so that you are really grasping the content, which is what I'm hearing you say. It's more important to really understand than just keep going for the sake of keeping going. And I'm glad to hear Ms. Aluni saying that we're starting to change that culture of stigma, but I don't think we're quite there yet. So work to be done there. So all good reports here today. Ms. Edison will look forward to I see some more questions here, but those multiple measures, math is always read in those multiple measures. And so, if this piece is working, then why isn't it showing up in those other multiple measures? The grades are working. So what about the district assessments? What about the external assessments? And math is just too often in the red. And so, Mr. Seward, welcome on board. And we have work to do. And I want to see those math blocks being green, in particular in 5th and 8th grade, where we have a lot of challenges in math. So, Ms. Aluni, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate the discussion about professional development that happened during this meeting today. I'd also like to extend that discussion of professional development to our counseling staff and those who guide students through course registration processes. I think a lot of where the stigma that was mentioned here today about older students taking, lower level classes, even though in MCPS we're all already above national standards, comes from counseling staff who perpetuate this idea that you need to keep going on the track and follow down a pathway. But speaking with counselors about the importance of actually understanding where a student is in their skills and their ability and using that as the primary indicator of what their course registration for a student should be instead of a pathway or a program. And also speaking with counseling staff about using multiple measures and making that decision. So not just grades or the teacher recommendation, but speaking with students and their families about where they are and how they feel and where they want to be. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there, that that's also an important component of professional development.
Ms. Harris?
Yeah, I just building on something that Ms. Aluni said, I do appreciate sort of this kind of frank and robust conversation Because I think in a lot of ways, many of us have been thinking for years that we need a bit of a culture shift inside our school system and a little bit more of an open-minded look at how do we serve students better. And, you know, speaking as a parent who went through this process with a student in middle school and student placed in algebra as a seventh grader, and me as the parent thinking, oh, I'm not sure how this is going to work out. And then, you know, a student doing okay, but me to the extent that they were like, okay, yeah, let's go on 8th grade geometry, and knowing as the parent that the level of mastery wasn't there, and but to have a lot of pushing to get the opportunity from my child to take algebra again as an 8th grader. And there was a lot of resistance there. And I think there is some maybe holdovers from earlier days where we were really looking at these 7 keys and college for everybody. And it's a cosmetic data point for the system to say, look how many of our 7th graders are taking algebra. But that doesn't necessarily mean that metric is what's best for our 7th graders. So I really appreciate the openness to really taking a relook at how we are serving students, how we're ensuring that they are really mastering this content, learning how to think critically, learning how to apply what they're learning, and that it's preparation as the sort of baseline piece that we're really focused on, instead of, okay, you passed, move on. So I really do appreciate that. And this is maybe just a philosophical question. Looking at what MSDE has done now with getting the move to get away from these state level assessments in certain content areas and moving toward just, you know, course finals or, you know, cumulative course assessments as the way that students' mastery we're going to be determining. So, you know, what are we thinking? Again, philosophical. Is this going to help us? I mean, we were talking about multiple measures of success and multiple, you know, measures of how students show us what they know, and maybe the test or the grade isn't the thing. So if we're moving away from those state level assessments, what are we thinking are going to be some of the measures we're going to be looking at to see how well our students are really doing in especially this foundational course of algebra?
I'm not sure, but the one thing that I'm glad about, and as early as this week, Ms. Harris, the coordinator for mathematics at the state, invited us, Montgomery County Public Schools, to participate in the mathematics. There is a new committee that's being formed. That first meeting is going to be on April the 8th. I'll be representing Montgomery County Public Schools on that committee. So my answer is I don't know, but we will have a seat at the table to inform that conversation.
Wonderful, thank you. Ms. Sharon, do we have a few more slides left?
Yes, I think we have one more slide left. I think that concludes our part of the math presentation. We have one more slide left. We could bring the slide deck back up. So I just wanted to remind or just preview for the Strategic Planning Committee where we're going next. So our final meeting, I can't even believe it, already for this year on May 17th, is going to be focusing on college and career readiness and graduation rates. So that is going to be the primary focus of that particular presentation in alignment with the strategic plan. We also are going to be providing an update on the overall strategic plan. I shared last week at the board table that one of the things that we were working on within the district were 2 things. We were verifying and examining the strategies identified as part of the strategic plan to confirm those were the strategies that we really wanted to say were their most high leverage strategies over the next 4 years. And in addition to that, we are working on identifying how we are going to be tracking and monitoring the implementation of our strategies and reporting that out through our website and to our community. So there will be updates on that at the May 17th meeting. And then I just wanted to mention as well that we're continuing our communications campaigning around the strategic plan. We have a spotlight on the website currently with the strategic plan, as well as our one-pager that has been translated into all 7 languages available. We are sending that out to schools, and we're going to be continuing to integrate the strategic planning work in our conversations with our offices as we continue to work and build out our planning around all this important work. So I want to thank everybody for their participation today. This was a great discussion, and I'll turn it back over to Ms. Silvestri for any final questions and to wrap up.
Thank you. Any final thoughts or questions from the board, Dr. Joftis?
Ms. Silvestri, I hate to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I was just wondering if we could think about, as a board, organizing our agenda by strategic plan sections, and just making that as explicit as we can for our own purposes, and also for the public to see how we're aligning our work with that of this really great work that's been done and being done on the strategic plan.
So you mean at the full board table? So we came up with some priorities at our past retreat, and I know the ones that we deemed most important were identified by the board, and so we can certainly do that. If there's anything missing that we may have omitted inadvertently, we can revisit that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Again, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but let's talk off. Let's discuss how we can be really explicit on our agendas as to the part of the strategic plan that each topic area is addressing.
Sure. Okay, any final comments? Anyone else? All right, you always leave me with lots to think about. Always interested in meeting the needs of all of our students, from the kids that need the most acceleration to the kids that need the most help. We're only strong as our weakest link. And so I thank you so much for the presentation, and look forward to the work ahead. Thank you. This concludes the meeting.